Freedom is not free. Discover what it takes. It's time to tap and move forward.
Hello and welcome to Tap and Move Forward. I'm your host, Lynn Shelley. I'm excited to introduce you to Spencer Cooper, a chaplain in the Utah Air National Guard. He began his military career enlisting in the Marine Corps, planning to be in the band, but ended up deploying twice to Iraq with security forces. He first commissioned in the Navy before going to the Air National Guard and has a powerful message on what it means to take on the burden of the warrior. Here's the interview with Spencer Cooper. So why did you join the military and how old were you?
Well, at the time, the first time I joined, 22, I believe. Yeah, it was 2003, so 22. And I'd come back off of an LDS mission, feeling really, like going back to regular civilian life, didn't have the service aspect that I had grown to love on my mission. And so coming home, 9/11 had not too recently just happened, and I felt like that would be a great opportunity to kind of serve in a different way. But really it came down to I was praying a lot about my future, and at the time I was on a music scholarship up at Weber State University, and I remember just praying and praying every night, like, how do I really go forward and not feel like everything's just about me? How do I devote myself to something bigger and better, and have that feeling like I had on my mission of just being completely taken up in the needs of others. And I remember one night, it was a particularly hard night. I'd been running, at the time I worked in pest control, and it was a kind of a long day at work, and it had been a really hard night with having a conversation with my mom. And I was just really stressed out. And I remember walking across a golf course that was not too far from where we lived at the time. I lived in West Kaysville, but there's this corner where there's a golf course. I can't remember the name of it, but it's kind of in the corner of Farmington. And I walked over there, and I was walking across the golf course, and I remember clearly just this image flashing in my mind for a split second, but very powerfully, of a Marine in uniform. And at the time, by the way, I should let you know, I didn't come from a long line of military tradition. I wasn't like my dad or father or anyone. I think the last person that I knew of in my family line that really had served in any war was the Civil War. So it wasn't like I came from a long line of military tradition. So when I saw that picture of that soldier, in my mind it was a soldier. I couldn't tell you the difference between the Marine Corps and the Army at that time. So when I saw that, I just thought, wow, that was odd, and I really feel like maybe God's saying, yeah, military service would be something you could consider. But the miracle really happened for me when the next day I ran to classes. I was really going to be late, and I got there, and I remembered, how often when your teacher cancels class do you forget? But he had canceled class the week prior, and I totally had forgotten. So I ran all the way up there, about a 25-minute drive from my house. Got there, ran in, and on the way in, I went in, I found that they had class canceled, and I was like, oh, can't believe I forgot, how crazy, and turned back around to walk out, and on my way out, I saw that a Marine in that exact uniform, who turned out to be a guy over there looking for people who were interested in joining. So I took his card, Sergeant Byers, I believe was his name, Byers. And he gave me his card, and he didn't tell me much. He was on his way somewhere, and he was kind of in a hurry, but at least I had an address where I knew I could go sign up. So I went, and next day went into his office, and there was a gunnery sergeant there, big old African-American gunnery sergeant guy, and pretty intimidating and pretty built. And I walked in and said, hey, I'm here to sign up. I met one of the soldiers the other day, and he goes, soldiers? And I said, yeah, I want to be a soldier. And he's like, you mean a Marine? And I was like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. I didn't know there, so I was pretty ignorant. So yeah, having heard that, I said, sure, a Marine. And that was it. I never really looked at any other service. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be fight for my country. Like I didn't know what to tell them. I didn't know you had to pick a job. So they they realized they had someone really clueless. So they sat me down. They said, here's all the jobs that you could consider doing in the military. And as we went down the list, I was like, I don't know any of this stuff. I don't know how to repair cars. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to, like, all this stuff that I could see on there. Half the stuff I didn't even know what it meant, like radar technology and stuff. So finally, he's like, well, what do you do? What do you do right now? And I said, I'm on scholarship for music at Weber. He's like, you're a musician? I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, man. Stepson Byers was just up there the other day trying to recruit musicians. And there weren't any around. And I was like, oh, yeah. It's because our professor canceled class and I was the only one up there. And so he didn't realize I was a musician up there on campus. And so anyway, he's like, what do you play? I told him. He said, man, you could take a French horn audition with the guy in the West Coast, and if you make it, he'll send you to the School of Music. And if you go there, you'll never deploy. Like, you'll join a band somewhere in the U.S. and you'll just travel around, promoting different events and PR stuff. It will be great. And I thought, oh, this is awesome. So I just felt like that was perfect. Like, why couldn't I use my skills to serve my country in the way that I wanted to? And I loved music. It was my life. So going back home, I was like, Dad, this is great. Look what happened. I'm going to join the Marine Corps, and and they said I'll never deploy, I'll never be in harm's way. And he kind of looked at me and he said, hey, son, let me tell you something. He sat me down and he said, if you are going to join the military, regardless of what they're telling you, where you will or won't be, or in harm's way or not, you need to be ready to die for your country. And he said, because he said, I promise you, at some point they may need you. And I'm thinking, man, my dad's taking this really seriously, even though I'm just signing up for the band, But he said, no, promise me if you join, you'll have thoughtfully considered the fact that you could die and be in harm's way. And if you're good with that, then sign on the line. I'm fine. But don't sign up thinking that it'll never happen, because you're a warm body. That's what I remember him saying, that you're a warm body, and if they need you, they'll send you. I said, all right. Wise father, because
Yeah, that's such great advice.
yeah, after 6 months at the school, it was a wonderful 6 months. However, I was oddly intrigued by why they sent me through the entire basic training and after Marine combat training for like 4 weeks, and then finally got to my school. And I thought, man, that was a lot of combat training for someone who'll never deploy. Why would they waste the money on a bandsman? I really wondered that. But I met some other bandsmen, and I thought, well, I guess we all get trained. And as we got to the school, it was a great 6 months. Norfolk, it's not far from Norfolk, Virginia, but it's a little base called, back then it was a Naval Amphibious Base, Little Creek. I think it's a joint base now, but Little Creek is still there, and the school is still there, to my knowledge. And they have, they train everyone there, the Army, the Marine Corps, and the Navy bands all train there together. And it was an amazing time. It was awesome. It was everything I hoped it would be. And about 5 months later, I was getting ready to graduate, had passed off everything I needed to, and getting ready to walk and get my certificate. And my commander, which is like a principal of the school, but he's the commander of that installation, called me into his office and said, hey, good news and bad news, Cooper. And I was like, okay, well, the good news is you're getting stationed in Miramar. And I had no idea where that was. I didn't know what that meant. I thought it was actually a foreign country. So I was like, what? And he goes, oh, it's in San Diego. Don't worry about it. It's great. And I was like, oh, San Diego. That was exciting, because I wanted to be kind of close to home, close enough I could go home frequently. And at the time, I was also seriously still in a relationship with my girlfriend, even though she was on her mission in Argentina. So we were writing letters, and I was hoping that I wouldn't be like out of the country when she got home. So anyway, long story short, he said a bunch about Miramar, and then he said, bad news is, you want the bad news? And I said, sure. He said, your unit's currently attached to the 4th LAD Battalion, and they're in Iraq, and you're going to join them, like ASAP. Like you'll get there 2 weeks after they've left. So pack up your M16. And I thought, M16, I'm thinking the band's out in Iraq playing music. Nope, that's not what you'll be doing. And basically what we did was security forces work, perimeter, and checkpoints and pedestrian checkpoints as well as vehicle entry checkpoints the whole time. No, I shouldn't say the whole time. We traveled a little bit. During the Battle of Fallujah, we're up. My unit went up to relieve some of the people in the detention facilities in the prisons. Just before they swept through there, it was a crazy, crazy time. So many rockets and IEDs and just stuff getting lobbed into us, and I really learned that, wow, it was so hard, but I remember thinking, I'm prepared for this. Like, I was ready. I'd prepared myself back when I decided I would die for my country if it came to that. And I was really grateful my dad had said that, because I'll be honest, if he hadn't and I hadn't really pondered that a lot, it probably would have been more of a shock to my system than it was. But man, learned a lot, saw a lot, realized how desperately in need military families are for support and for healing and counseling and all the things that we really provide them as chaplains and family readiness and the stuff that I now work with full time. But my first exposure to that need was as a Marine, and I didn't know, I'll be honest, I didn't know what a chaplain was, really. I mean, I did because I was in the Marine Corps, I saw them. But I thought you had to be a Catholic priest or a Protestant. I didn't realize you could be a Latter-day Saint and be a chaplain. So for me, it was kind of mind-opening. And I got through my whole tour thinking that. I finished, by the way, they deployed me 6 weeks before my girlfriend got back from Argentina. So she then waited for me another 7 months, and it was interesting. It took from the time I took on our first date for junior prom in May of 98. We got married in May of 2005, so it was 7 years to the time that I thought man, this girl I want to marry, to the time we actually got married. But I was gone for 2 of those years, and then I got back. She left for a couple years, and she got back. I was deployed for 7 months, so it took time, and they were signed between all of those, but it finally worked out. So yeah, my joining the military that first time was a big education really quick in what the military really is and does. And I'm proud to say today I'm not so ignorant of it anymore.
You didn't really get an option.
That's right. Yep.
You got a first-class education.
I did.
On what it requires.
We married when I got back from that first deployment I was telling you about. I feel like it was 4 months after I got back that we actually got married. I can't remember exactly. And then, yeah, because I would have gotten back in maybe it was just a couple months. Because I think I got back in March. I think we got married the end of May. Well, I know we got married the end of May. I think it was March that I got back. So it's just a couple months. I went home on leave, and I knew I only had 2 weeks to ask her. So I asked her, and I said, I can come back up in 2 months, get a week of leave, and we can have some kind of a honeymoon and then be back to work. So I whisked her away down to San Diego and got deployed again 8 months later. So we spent our first anniversary, again, separated, but she was down in San Diego. And I was up there. So that second deployment was a little different than the first. There's obviously still a lot of stuff going on, but this time it mostly turned civil. By then they had turned against each other. The factions that were sort of fighting for power in Iraq were sort of in a civil war. Whereas the first time I was there, it was a lot more aimed toward us, the violence and things. So the second one was not perfectly quiet, but it was a lot quieter than the first, thank heavens. And when I got home, we had our first baby after that. So 6 weeks before I separated and I was done with my 4 years, we had our first baby. And then came back up to, by then I knew I wanted to go into family studies, some kind of, I was thinking I'd be a family therapist. Still didn't know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had chaplains, so to me, it was just about family therapy, maybe getting into, studying families or research or something like that.
Did you know that you had access to a chaplain as a Marine?
Yeah, and they would debrief us when certain things happened. I remember, I'll never forget my birthday one year. The first deployment was my birthday. I was there during October, and I woke up, what would that have been, my 24th birthday? I want to say, maybe 23rd birthday. Yeah, 23rd. Oh, that's right, because it was my golden birthday. I was 23 on the 23rd of October, that's right. And I woke up to this earth-shattering explosion. Probably, among the biggest that I ever experienced out there. And of course, you were told, get down. So we all jump off our racks and hit the floor. And my bunkmate at the time, Greg, his name was Greg, and he was just, him and I, we became pretty good friends, but he jumps down off his rack and lands literally on top of me. I mean, it hurt so bad. And he just said, "Happy birthday, Coop." That's all I remember saying. And I was like, wow, he remembers my birthday in the middle of all that. He'd been teasing me about it coming up, so I'll never forget that. And we went outside, actually, and it was terrible. We found out why it'd been so loud. There was a vehicle entry point in the headquarters vehicle entry point where our cans were. Where we lived in, they had a car bomb that morning go off and killed a lot of third country nationals, and different, I think it was a couple contractors were involved as well, and amazingly no Marines were injured, but that's because they had followed protocol and gone behind the berm and done the inspection correctly. But when I got down there, that morning I took over that next shift. And I was sitting in that seat watching them, do all the investigative stuff and take pictures and then clean up. And you sit there pondering your mortality, and that happens. Like, man, if I had been on this post even an hour and a half earlier, could have been involved in all this. And, those kinds of things, they really, really, truly make you think and make you decide what you want to do with your life. And what I had learned was that the few moments I did get to actually play with the band between deployments, there was this glorious 9-month period of time where actually Ronald Reagan had died in that period of time, and just about the time I got married in 05, yep. And we got to play for his funeral. So it was pretty amazing to be in the Marine Corps. It was an inspiring, obviously very patriotic thing, but mostly it just made me aware of how much need there was for families. It really did. I watched all my buddies' families after deployments fall apart in some unbelievable bad ways. And it occurred to me that they hadn't really found something to make their foundation stone in life. They hadn't really come together over some deep-seated, sacred beliefs that keep my wife and I going and that kept us strong during those times. And if anything, we got stronger each time I got home. I felt like my marriage got better and better. Wow. But I watched my buddies all kind of crumble, and just kind of, that made me wonder, what is all that about? Like, what happens to military families that go through that? And so going back to school when I finally got out that's what I decided to study, was marriage, family, human development.
Real fast, if we go back, how did you deal with the stress? What were your best tactics for dealing with the stress in those environments?
For me, it all had to do with the relationships I had in my life. I'll be honest, like, I remember writing so often to my then girlfriend, now wife, Stephanie, even though she had gotten home. Like I said, I only deployed 6 weeks before she got done with her mission. So she was home for most of my deployment. And there were times when back then we didn't have the, internet in your own room, and like you could Skype and everything. That wasn't all established. And so you'd wait in line for sometimes hours to use a phone, or go into some kind of Zipper or Nipper net where you could actually, contact homes under supervised, supervision. But I would write her almost every day. We could email back then, but again, took a while to get into the room where there's limited computers to use. And so we wrote at least a couple times a week, and I'd hear back from her at least, and then we talked on the phone as much as we could. And to me, that just, having something to look forward to in the future, having something to believe in, and knowing that somebody did care about you in a deep way, and for me, the relationships. I also have a very supportive mother. She always was very, she always sent me packages and whatever, and at the time, before I was married, she also played a big role in keeping my spirits up. But it was tough. I mean, I'll be honest, it's easy to speak about now, more than a decade removed, but those were some of the darkest times of my life. I mean, there were times I just thought, why is this happening to me? Why am I here? I thought I'd made a huge mistake with my life. I didn't know where it was going. I knew I wasn't going to be a Marine forever. I knew that. But I didn't know why God had led me there. And I felt like it was God that led me there. And so I really had a sort of, I guess you could call, crisis of faith. And I was studying. I read books like crazy. I'll tell you, that's the only thing that kept me sane. That's another way I just read. I knew if your mind is idle out there, oh my gosh, it's crazy. I saw people get into all kinds of there was a Marine that was with us who was suicidal because he just, again, wouldn't fill his mind or his time with anything but just being homesick. And he literally on post one day put a shotgun to his foot and pulled the trigger just to go home. That's how desperate he was. And it went right through his foot, right through the. It was kind of strange because out there back then, nothing was really permanent. It was all just, we had these like wooden, built by the CBs, makeshift little guard posts. It wasn't like anything was permanent. It was kind of, they're still early on being in Iraq, and we cleaned it up and everything, but then like the hole from the shot stayed in the wood the rest of the time we were there. Like no one came and repaired it or anything. It just stayed there. And every time I was on that post and it was in that guard shack, I just remember, thinking, man, how easy you can let your mind go down that dark path if you let it.
So that even served as a reminder to you of what path not to take?
Yeah, it really did. And kept me really relying on and kind of depending on those relationships that I had. I had some good friends who wrote me. I had my father, obviously, who wrote me letters from time to time, and just as much as I could. I was one of those annoying Marines, I think, to my supervisors, because my senior NCOs, they were always, I'm always asking them to go use the phone, like every day. And I know that it became annoying, and I probably was one of the ones who tried to communicate with home most. But I'm telling you, that's why, because for me it was vital. And I think it's vital for everybody, but those who don't do it, they don't devote time to it, they just start to wonder why they don't feel that support in their life, or they don't feel, so mentally healthy. And then they come home and then have to adapt to all those relationships that haven't really grown while they've been gone. So.
It can be hard for people to open up or to try and speak to someone at home when the person that's at home doesn't really understand. They haven't seen the same kind of thing. What would you say to somebody who's in that type of situation? The
supporter at home, you're saying? That person
when they're struggling to reach out because they say, well, this person doesn't understand.
Gotcha, yeah. It is hard. I remember having conversations with my mom and then girlfriend at the time, and they try and be supportive. They try and help. Particularly one night, I remember we'd had a pretty intense rocket attack on base, and you're down underneath the tables till it's all cleared, and you're just hearing them fall outside, and you're hoping it's not going to hit the building you're in next. And after one of those incidents, I made a phone call home, and I believe it was to my girlfriend. And then the same night I called my mom, and with both of those conversations, they just felt empty. And it wasn't because they weren't saying the normal things that they say, to just, I love you, miss you, hope you're safe. But you just realize that no matter what they say, their tone of voice conveys the fact that they have no clue about what's really happening out there, and how many people on a given day are dying from this conflict in a place that to them is just the furthest thing from their mind, like it doesn't exist.
Right.
And so you have there's some real, I understand people who have what we now call in the helping professions moral injury, where you've seen something that goes against everything you believe, but then you look back home and they're not, people at home aren't even aware of the fact that moral travesty has taken place. And it goes deep, cuts deep into the heart of the warrior to think about what they've seen and then come home and see that people don't care, or not that they don't care, but they're oblivious to it. And I remember feeling that, and all you can do is just say, hey, I can't hold them accountable for what they don't know, like you can't start to believe or convince yourself of the idea that because they don't know or they're unaware, because they can't know, that they don't care. They do care, they're doing what they can do, but that's the burden of the warrior. Like that's what we take upon ourselves when we join the military, is to shoulder that load. And frankly, carry all the darkest parts of human conflict by saying, I'm going to be that person who's willing to see the darkest part of what, humanity can do to each other. And that will require everything I have to still believe in goodness and light. And to me, it was that whole struggle, both times I deployed. To be honest, the first deployment was definitely the most violent that I was on, just regular rocket. I mean, there wasn't 2 or 3 days that would go by until we had another rocket attack or another mortar launched in. But my harder deployment to go on, to leave home, was definitely the second, because I'd been there. I'd seen it all. I knew what I was in for that time. Whereas leaving the first time, in a strange way, to someone who's joined the military, it's kind of like, oh, exciting. Like, oh, what's what's it gonna be like? And the second time is not exciting at all. And third time and so on. Like that, you just every time you go back, you dread the reality of what you're about to see and experience. But something in you knows, hey, this is the duty, this is the right thing to do, and this is what I promised I would do. And there's not really an option anyway. I mean, what are your choices at that point? So I really truly gained a deep appreciation for those who serve our country and bear that burden of being a witness to the evil and hatred and contention of mankind on the earth. It's really probably the most sobering thing you can experience in life, in my opinion.
So what do you think is the secret for being able to go through that, to witness that, to experience it, and to still carry with you hope, joy, light?
You could say I'm biased, I suppose, as a chaplain.
Right.
But that bias didn't come out of a vacuum. For me, it was personal experiences with God. That when I would cry and pray and wrench my mind as to try and understand how this stuff ever makes sense and whether it's good or bad or right or wrong, eventually you get answers. And it was those answers on my first deployment, truly, that would come at the most dark times, that this comfort or this peaceful feeling that sort of was beyond yourself. It didn't come from you. It was obvious that it came from another source, and it was just there to comfort you. And that's where I think a little bit as a missionary, obviously, you go and you serve people and you kind of learn. For me, my mission was about the joy of service and love and just the joy that it is to help another human being. But my real, I guess if you could say, face-to-face time with God and the reality of what I believed about life happened after on my tours to Iraq. And that's when you really have to get down to what you do believe and what you don't believe, and the good and the bad about all of it. So those answers that came to me through prayer and reading, I told you I read a lot and studied a lot of everything. I mean, everything. I read books that I probably never would have read otherwise, which also turned me on to education. I'll be honest, I was not the greatest student in high school. Music was my life, and if it wasn't music, I didn't really care about it much. But after you're in Iraq for so many, week after week after week, and you're just bored to tears most of the time until an exciting moment happens, you get an appreciation for things like Shakespeare, and like just the finer arts and the people who write great, like John Milton. I remember reading his book out there, C.S. Lewis. I went through a lot of that. And to me, it was this hugely formative time that made me realize, hey, I don't have to study music when I go back to college. Like, I love music and it'll always be my favorite passion personally. I still today do it. But it occurred to me that I didn't need to be tied to that scholarship on music. Like, I could go back and I could study anything. And of course, the military also let me do that with the GI Bill. I had a way to pay for it. Before, I'm like, well, I have to be a music major because I'm on a music scholarship, so it wasn't like I had a lot of options. That was all I got good at in high school. I wasn't a sterling rogue scholar or anything like that. So I had options after the military, and I thank the military for that. They gave me that option, for serving. So coming out and using my GI Bill let me study whatever I wanted, and that's when I really changed fields to study families and family life.
So after you came back and completed your 4 years, you left the Marines.
Yep.
And then you went to college.
Yep. You do 4 active and then 4 inactive, which is really nothing except showing up once a year and getting weighed and measured. And that happened up at Fort Douglas in Salt Lake. And, but you don't serve in any way, shape, or form. You don't even drill. It's not like a guard status or a reserve status at all. You just go once a year and get kind of check in, say I'm still alive, and here's my current standing. And then you're done. And I had finished my bachelor's degree by then, by the time the second 4 years of inactive reserve were done. And so I'd already actually signed a contract as a chaplain candidate with the Navy before those 4 years of inactive service were done. So I was back onto kind of like more like a reserve status with the Navy for the 2 years I was in my program as a master's student in religious studies for chaplains, or what most people call a Master's of Divinity, which is the counseling. About a third of it's counseling, a third of it's world religions and studying what everyone believes and how to incorporate that into counseling. And then about a third of it's at BYU, they require the church history and doctrine in your own faith as well. So it's a pretty demanding program, 90 credit hours, and you get it in about 2 years. So it's just like more than full time. I started with a cohort of 12 individuals. 8 of us graduated the program, and 7 were endorsed to be chaplains, which means they could go on and become a chaplain if they signed with one of the uniformed services. So it's a pretty rigorous program still today. It's pretty amazing. They've kind of changed it a little bit since I've been there, but just an amazing program. And all of that, to me, to answer your question finally, was part of my sort of keeping my joy and my faith and hope, and the view of society that, look, there's more good than bad that happens. Yeah, there's terrible stuff that happens, and we're capable of amazingly bad things, but more often than not, there's just acts of service and love and selflessness. I even saw it from the people in the prison in Fallujah. Like, those people who we always deemed as terrorists and terrible people, most of them are just young kids trying to make a buck. Frankly, they were getting paid to do what they did, so they could feed their family or whatever. And just young guys. And when they'd come in, they'd bond together. They'd treat each other with respect within the prison. And you realize they're human too. And they're our enemy, Like, those kinds of things that I saw more often. And I chose to focus on those more often than just the bad. Because it is a choice, to see humanity one way or another. We're capable of such terrible bad, and we're capable of incredible good. And you're going to focus on one of those in your life. I'm not sure if I see the point on focusing on the bad. I mean, I understand it's there, and I'm completely aware of it. But like, what good does it do anybody to simply only focus on that part of it? Whereas if you focus on the part that's good, things tend to get better. I've seen that in my own life.
Focusing on the bad, you'll either end up literally or figuratively shooting yourself in the foot.
That's right, shooting yourself in the foot. That's right, exactly. That's what happened to that guy, I'll tell you. Exactly right. Yep.
If you could give any advice to a newly enlisted member, what would it be?
Number 1, mind your relationships. Keep strong relationships. I talked about how those kept me afloat. Relationships will make or break your life. Don't burn bridges with people, even if they're relationships you think you could do without. Maybe you had a fight with a sibling, or maybe you are kind of on the outs with your significant other right now. But man, they matter in those moments, And I guess I'd give them the same advice my dad gave me. Don't sign on the line unless you're willing to give your life for your country, because you never know where you'll end up in military service. And you may think you're going in for one thing and be used for a completely different thing. So be ready to give your life, mind your relationships, and then finally, I guess, focus on the good, like we talked about. Like, just look out for there's so many more acts of love and service and kindness every single day. That's the miracle. To me, I'll be honest, it was the very beginning of my real belief in God. Because many people, they focus on what is theologically called the problem of pain or evil, which is to say, because there's evil, because evil exists, because there is pain in the world, then either God is not powerful enough to get rid of it, so he's not all powerful, or he could get rid of it, but he chooses not to, so he can't be all good. But believing in an all-powerful, all-good God is incompatible. And many people start losing their faith there. And it's a hard argument, because how do you explain pain and good all in one? A good God certainly doesn't want to see his children suffer, and an all-powerful one wouldn't. So how is it that God can be all good and all-powerful? That question takes years of personal searching, but for me the answer became quite simple, and that was, well, unless pain serves some purpose in our life, unless pain teaches us something invaluable that a good, all-powerful teacher would want us to learn, and if that's true, then God can be all good and all powerful. And I believe in my life, the greatest lessons I've learned have come from the most painful moments. And I would never trade them, as painful as they are, And I believe that's actually the lesson he taught himself when he refused to have the marks in his hands and his side and his feet taken. I think he was a resurrected being. He could have had a perfect body, But he returned and he showed his apostles the marks in his hands and his feet. And that's how they recognized him, by the pain that he kept as a reminder of the worst thing he'd ever been through. So to me, I guess that's the lesson I took from it too, is that, man, those painful moments, they are what make you what you are. And if that lesson is what you came down to learn on earth, then how could a good, loving God spare you those lessons? As I've taught it over the years to different people, and I currently help with the BYU program myself down in Provo, the new chaplain's up and coming, I also use this parallel. It's like a vaccination. Like a good parent who knows that they don't want their kid to get polio is going to let their kid go into a doctor's office with fear and trembling and get a shot, a metal needle poked into their arm. It hurts the kid. They're very sensitive, even more than we are at that age. And they fear it. And it's you could say mildly traumatizing, I suppose. So why do we subject them to it at such a young age? Well, we know two things. Number one, that pain is nothing compared to the pain they could have, given that they could get polio if they don't get this shot, right? But secondly, we also understand polio as adults in a way that kids don't and can't. When we have memories of what it was like when, man, we were losing thousands and thousands of kids every year to that disease. Not only that, but the ability to walk and other things, even if they didn't die from it, they usually had lasting effects. And so if you consider that God also knows things we don't know, and he has understanding we don't have, and he can view evil in ways we don't understand it, and we can view good that way, then when he allows us to go through painful suffering down here, just for a mortal moment, just for a minute, just for like a brief life compared to eternity, it's like getting a vaccination, and you get to experience this momentary evil where you can only take so much pain and then your body gives out like it's over. But what is the point of it? So that long term, so that forever, never, never, eternally, I believe, we do not have lasting effects of hatred and malice and evil forever, never, never. That we all have compassion, that we gain this understanding for what it is to be hateful to someone, or what it feels like to be injured or hurt by other people's malice. And I think that's God's vaccination system. Like he creates good people eternally by subjecting them temporarily to pain and suffering. And if that's true, then certainly he is an all-powerful, all-loving, and all-good God. And that is not incompatible to me.
So when you look back at your experience being deployed and how difficult and painful that was for you, when you look back at that now, what value have you gleaned from it?
Certainly an appreciation for what it costs to be free. The human toll. I don't even mean financial. I mean, it's an incredible financial cost. Everyone knows that. They announce that every day in the news. But what we miss is how much it just takes out of human beings. The emotional and the mental and the spiritual labor that it is to go out there. Every 6 months, we just keep sending guys out there. Have been doing this now 15 years since Afghanistan. And more, I think, than now. And so this cost that it takes, the human toll on relationships and lives, and the burden that it is to go out and do that. The stress levels, just freedom is so much more than I ever thought it was, that so many men through history have put themselves through that just for the few of us to be free here at home. Like that value and the love of my country that came out of that is deeper than words. Just I think of my own experience and I multiply that by the millions and millions of men and women who've served our country, and I just think, man, what a rare thing. What a rare country we really belong to, that it's willing to bear that burden so much repeatedly over history. Just to remain free, just to keep our rule of law and our beliefs of our Constitution and everything in place to make what we believe can be a good society, though I'm not sure that any generation in America would say it was a perfect one. There's always issues and problems, but almost for the idea, for the dream, to have the chance to make a better society, we go out and we continually fight and fight and fight. And that's amazing to me. Like when I think of it personally, I just think I can't believe so many men and women have been willing to do that. And the day that generation comes that's not willing to do that is the day we lose that, So to me, it taught me just this deep love of country. And of course, the relationship with God was formed while I was out there, which has never ended. So it was invaluable. Again, probably the most treasured experiences in my life, though they were some of the worst.
And now that you are a chaplain, what would you want the younger ranks in the military to know about chaplains?
Well, number one, first and foremost, I'm not sure how many of them realize that chaplains have the training and counseling and things that they have. They go through this rigorous, we're one of the most, besides doctors, we're probably the most educated individuals, just credit hour per credit hour in the military. And we have to go through a lot of processes to become. It took me from the time I started the process to become a chaplain with the church to the time I actually was appointed a chaplain here in the Air Guard. 7 years of training and interviews and psychological testing and all the stuff that you have to go through, just years of rigor. And it's worth it now. Like, I love what I do, but a lot of times I think the military devalues what chaplains really do bring to the table. They think, well, as long as they're doing their religious thing, that's cool. But man, they've studied family, and they've studied counseling, and they've studied a lot of other family life issues in depth, even ethics. I mean, we had to take these incredible ethics classes that if the military would look at more often, we might make better choices, But when they talk about ethics, it's usually in a legal term. They're more worried about, are we going to get in trouble or not? They rarely come to the chaplains and ask the question, is this the right thing to do or not? And why would you say it is, and why would you say it isn't? And look at the ethical issue at hand. But the bigger one for the enlistees, the people who are coming in new and don't know chaplains, they also provide 100%. 100%. We're the only ones in the military truly that have 100% no matter what confidentiality. We cannot tell anyone else what you told us without your express written permission. And so it's a place to come and tell someone something that you don't want bled out into your career life or to your family life or anything else, your social life, and you can have that. That's a rare thing in life. Even in the state of Utah, there are limitations upon local state clergy and what they do have to and have to not report. Whereas when we're in a federal status here as chaplains, we don't even have those limitations on us for confidentiality. So sometimes you're told some pretty incredible, wow, holy cow, I can't believe that is happening right now kind of stuff. And you just have to sit with it. You just have to trust that person will learn from it and get better because they refuse to go help anywhere else. But of course, as chaplains, we do encourage and try and support them going to other people to get the help that they do need if they have an issue like that. But we can't force it. It has to be them. We can't go out and say to their commander or to any kind of medical professional or psychological helper that this person has done this, they need the help. They can't say that. So it's 100% confidential, and to me that's priceless. I've had some of my best experiences because people knew that they could tell a chaplain something they've never told anyone else, and that's where healing can begin, when they can finally talk about something they felt like was so dark they couldn't say it to anyone. And then they realize over time, I can handle this. I can do this. It's not, maybe this is as dark as scary as I thought it was, because they finally got it out in the open. And so I'd encourage everyone who doesn't know chaplaincy to realize that's a huge benefit of what chaplains bring to the military, is simply a safe place to go and talk about your deepest, darkest problems, or the things you're most embarrassed by, or the things you most fear. And we are a non-judgmental, safe place to come.
I have to admit that I wish that I understood when I first got in really what the chaplain was. I think I had a perception that it was so religious based, that it was really just someone there to help you with your faith for whatever reason, if you needed some help with your faith.
Yeah, and we help with that too. But but yeah, if you don't, I've counseled as many people, I guess, who don't profess necessarily a strong faith,
right,
as I have people of faith. And it's an invaluable understanding.
For me, it wasn't until I heard you speak about how passionate you were on the fact that you even represent the people who don't have faith or choose not to have faith.
That's right.
And that's proudly part of what you do, that I decided to come to you for an issue I had, and you were very helpful.
Yep. We represent as chaplains the First Amendment. that gives us the rights to believe or not believe whatever we want to, right? And if people's rights to believe what they want to get infringed upon, that also infringes upon the rights of people to say, and I have a right to not believe what I don't want to believe. So to me, it's all one. Like, I have to protect that individual's right to be, I guess, what they would call secular, completely atheist, and the person's right to believe what they want to believe. In America, we've set up a constitution that guarantees that right. And both of those are sacred to me. One of the most famous, I guess you could say, and original atheists in our society, though I don't know if you could quite categorize him as atheist, but certainly Thomas Jefferson had an interest in creating this, not because he was an uber religious man, but because he was actually tired of the corruption that he saw at the time in different clergy and church leadership. And so he wanted to make a careful distinction between, look, everyone should have a right to profess and believe what they want to and worship how, where, and what they may. But certainly we don't want that to infringe upon people who say, I don't want to go to church and I shouldn't have to. And most governments, that was a radical transition. At the time, if you were not, of the Church of England in England, then you weren't English. You like lost your citizenship. There are still countries like that today. My wife and I spent time in Romania, where if you're not Romanian Orthodox, because it is a government-tied organization to their government, then there's an issue with you being Romanian, truly. And we don't have that problem in America. You're an American, whether you believe or don't believe, but regardless of what you believe, and this is why I'm a chaplain, I believe this wholeheartedly, you still have spiritual issues. And you may call them what you want. You may call them issues of conscience or of the metaphysical realm.
Or ethics.
But what those come down to, for me, are spiritual issues. All of us have times in life when our spirits are high. And all of us have times in life when our spirits need care. And all of us have spirits. And whether you believe that came from a divine creator or whether you believe it is a part of evolution is beyond my real concern. What I care about is the fact that you have that, and you have that need. And if I can help you with that need, I've done my job as chaplain. So.
On my dog tag, it literally says no preference.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that my spirituality, as you're defining it, isn't something that's a matter of personal pride for me. Mm-hmm. It's actually something that I care a lot about. And because I don't necessarily affiliate myself with any particular religion, sometimes that can make me feel a little bit, especially considering the area, like an outsider. And so it was really important to me to hear you talk about your job as a chaplain is to support and help anyone from any belief, right, which included me, for whatever version I have of all of the versions that are out there.
It can be confusing, there's no question. But yeah, I mean, you came in a moment of need, and it was like I've seen a million other people do. It's the hardest thing in the world to take a real problem to somebody and talk about it when you never have before. And every single time someone does that, I'm just in awe. I sit back and I just think, man, I have such respect for this individual who faced a fear that, frankly, most people don't. Most people just keep it in until it kills them, or keep them in until they are so depressed they can't function, or maybe they keep it in their whole life and they're functional, but they never truly thrive or find complete fulfillment in life because they've just kept this thing to themselves, put it in the back closet or whatever. And being real and honest and genuine for anybody's soul is a good thing. Being able to talk openly about what you're really going through and experiencing in life is a good thing. And I think that the more we can spread that message in the military, the less negative indicators we'll have, of divorce, depression, suicide, etc.
Not just being able to talk about it, but also being able to get somebody's outside perspective can be invaluable. And not to mention, like you said, having experience in family and relationships, which for me, it was a relationship issue. And when you get so involved in something, it's almost like living in a bubble where it's all you can see and focus on. And it's so hard to know sometimes what is real and what's not real, what's healthy, what's not healthy, and to have somebody who's outside of that bubble
Yep, take a
who
look.
can look at it and just give you some thoughts on it.
Yep.
That for me was what was so invaluable and really got me on the process of healing from that particular.
It's a great testament to what we do. Thank you.
So, are there any books? You've talked about reading a lot of books, particular specific books that have been helpful or kind of revolutionary for you throughout your life?
Obviously, besides the Bible and the Book of Mormon for me, which are essential, vital, spiritually edifying books, I would say whatever your faith, whatever the holy literature is of your faith, they hold tight to that. Study it like crazy. That stuff didn't, again, it wasn't just created out of nothing. It came from years and years and years and years of human experience and inspired leadership and even divine revelation. I would not ever recommend people don't delve into those scriptures. But besides the scriptures, I would say, for me personally, there's been some pretty incredible shifting. Back early on in my education, one of my favorites was called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, talking about some of what we talked about today a little bit, actually, the problem of pain and suffering and the things that kind of throw believers for a loop when they first encounter in life, because they don't know that they have a good theological or a good intellectual explanation for how that could exist. But it's a beautiful, well-written book that really buoyed me up. And I read that for the first time on my first, I believe it was, the first time on my first deployment. The Screwtape Letters is another one by C.S. Lewis that I love. I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. And also, if you're grieving, if you've gone through a loss, I highly recommend, and I do to almost everyone who I counsel, that they read C.S. Lewis's own, really journal is what it almost is, more than a book. It's just a thin little book that are his writings about when he lost his wife to cancer and what it was like to go through that. And man, what an incredible book. It's called A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. Incredible book, a very healing book, because you're reading someone else go through what you're going through and you experience loss and you just relate so much. And it can be transformational. It's like having your own therapist in a little tiny book. It's really great. But his insights in there and his quotes are just very inspiring as well. And then, I don't know, I would always say one of my favorite all-time books, especially in the field, if you're looking for family help, is a book by the Arbinger Institute, if you don't know who they are.
I know the Arbinger
Yeah, do you?
Institute.
Okay.
Absolutely.
They're a great institute, and it's called Bonds That Make Us Free.
Oh, I know that one.
And the author is C. Terry Warner. He used to be a philosophy professor at Brigham Young University, actually. But his philosophy group goes well outside the bounds of his faith. It's a group of individuals who now write these books together and publish them as an institute. And that Bonds That Makes Us Free, if you're going through a relationship or marriage issues, or if you want the short version that's very different but still very much powerful, kind of written more for businesses, but it very much affects relationships, and I've seen it change relationships pretty effectively. And it's a much shorter version. Bonds That Make Us Free is kind of a thicker book that's just meaty and beautiful, and I love reading it. But if you're not much of a reader, pick up the book that's called Leadership and Self-Deception.
I loved that one.
Yeah.
I read it so fast. I went through it,
Yeah.
I think, in one day. I was eating it. I loved every word.
Yeah.
It's such a great book.
And they have so many great ones. The Anatomy of Peace, The Peace Giver now. James Farrell took over the organization after C. Terry Warner, and he has written some really incredible ones as well. So just, I love them. They're a particular favorite of mine. The way they put philosophy it just makes you realize things you've never thought of in a new way. And it's really, regardless of whether you're a believer or not, they don't write them necessarily from a Christian point of view. They write them from a secular point of view, but of course incorporating principles that Christians would certainly agree with. So I love that organization. And then, let's see, think of any other circumstances, maybe I would have you read Love and Respect by Engelbert. I think his name is Egerton. Egerton, I think is his last name. Love and Respect. That's the one I most give to couples. It's just a beautiful book. It's a Christian book by a Christian author, Dr. Egerton. I might be saying that wrong, but I think it's Egerton. And it's called Love and Respect. Just a great read for for just implementing great principles in relationships. Not even necessarily marriages, just relationships. But it is written for marriages. So it's one of my favorites.
Are there any behaviors or skills that you learned in the military that have followed you in your civilian life?
Man, yeah. Well, I guess I'd be more tough pressed to answer what ones haven't improved. Military will just sharpen you or kill you, I guess. I like it. It really does make everything that you do so much more meaningful, I guess. And because of that, you just get better. I guess the one that comes to mind for me the most would be just relationships with people in a short-term setting. So as chaplains, many times we'll only have one session with somebody. We're not long-term therapists. We're not here to see a family over a year and see them weekly on a set schedule. If they need that kind of therapy, we refer out to family therapists and such. But we do see people for short-term sort of emergent and crisis situations, and even just normal situations in the military, but that are just 1 or 2 sessions. And building a relationship with someone very quickly in a very short, you have 1 hour with someone. How close can you get to them in 1 hour? That's a challenge. But, being deployed, that's where I first gained that skill. You're with people sometimes you jumped in a Humvee with, and you're going on some kind of patrol or something, and this person has my back. I mean, this person is the person who my life now depends on, and his on mine.
Right.
And how quickly you form that bond and that relationship, and how quickly you learn to trust each other at a deep level. For me, I gained that skill for the first time deeply on my deployments. Just feeling like you can love anybody. You can love anybody. And I say that all the time, people. Really, truly. You might think you have mortal enemies out there. No, you don't. You can. The best thing we could do for couples who are really, really fighting each other and think they really hate each other's guts is deploy them together. Put them out in a Humvee in a patrol and see how quickly they realize I actually could care and love for this person.
Right.
I just haven't seen it that way. I've just refused to look at them as someone that matters, even though I disagree vehemently with what they believe. And by the way, did I share a belief? I mean, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Did I share a belief with every single person I deployed with? Not even close. Most people I deployed with vehemently disagreed with my beliefs, but it didn't matter. Like, you realized human beings and Americans are, particularly in deployed settings when you're serving your country, that's why I say Americans, but human beings in general, they have an ability to bond, form relationships quickly, and truly care for each other, even when they don't even believe or share a common background. There's something about being human that makes us really, truly care about the other. And I think it's part of our society and how we are such societal creatures. And you can truly share that belief with anybody. Just your life matters, and I'm going to stand up for it. And once you've seen somebody do that for you, in a very short-term setting, even after 1 hour, it's hard not to love them. So I use that. That skill got very important as a chaplain. When they walk in your office and you realize you only have 1 hour with them, the biggest thing they can feel, the most important thing you can do in that hour, you're not going to solve all their problems in an hour, but you can make them feel that they matter and that you care, and they love you for that. So it helps.
If you could give one superpower to the new enlistees, what would you give them?
One superpower. Oh, man. Superpower. Gosh, that's a tough one. I guess I would want to say, when I was in, I wanted to see the future more than anything. Like, I wanted to be able to have a crystal ball and be able to see what was coming. Now that I've gone through it and realized it wouldn't have been helpful. I would have projected a bunch of stuff onto that site that I saw and thought, oh, I'm not going through that. I'm not going to do it. I won't do that. Imagine if I could have seen what would have really happened when I first enlisted. And I wouldn't have just been spending 4 years just playing in the band and having a great time in parades, etc. I probably said, never mind. And so even though seeing the future would seem like quite a great superpower to have, and I'm sure everyone who joins the military wishes they could have that crystal ball like I wished. I don't know if I'd wish that on them now, because it may take away something from the experience and from what they're supposed to learn, and maybe make them do things otherwise that they wouldn't do. So maybe the best superpower I would wish upon them would be actually to maybe Midas's golden touch or something, where they can actually turn anything into money, because I know that our military families need a lot more money. And I relate to that too as an early college student after the military even. And I've been in 4 years, but when you're enlisted, it is service. When we say service, it's service, because they just don't even get paid near what they should, given what they do for our country. Right. But we can't, on the other hand. If we did, we'd bankrupt our nation. And so we do. We ask a ton of them. And I wish they had more financial assistance. And it's probably one of the main things I deal with as a chaplain as well. Individuals or families who are new in the military struggling financially. So maybe everything they touch turn into gold, except each other.
What about a skill set? If you could give them one skill set.
This is an easier one. True leadership. And what I mean by that is the kind of leadership that actually values individuals. Not the leadership that I think we sadly suffer from a lot of times today in our military, about sort of like, now I have the rank and I'm in control, I'm in charge. The leadership more that I'm thinking of is along the lines of, say, Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa. And it would be revolutionary if we, as a military, would incorporate the value and sanctity of human life in the soldiers we train, in the soldiers that we care for and oversee. I think the biggest problem the military has, to be honest, is that it has this tradition of very authoritarian leadership styles, which, if you study family life, authoritarian is when you have a lot of control, very high control. It's focused on the control, but there's not a lot of expression there's not a lot of emotional expression of affection. And what they've proven is that authoritative leadership styles are better, and they work far better both in families and, I believe, in the military setting. Authoritative individuals certainly have a goal in mind, like Gandhi did. They certainly know what they're going for, and they exercise a lot of control over themselves. But they also express a lot of affection for those who they lead. They express love and affection frequently. And people under those kind of leaders, they understand they matter, and I think would be more willing to give their life for that kind of a leader. And if we had more authoritative leaders, if there was a skill set I could give them, it would be authoritative leadership, to go study what it is to be an authoritative leader. Not a weak leader, not an unassertive leader, but a leader that at the same moment in which he asserts himself, he also, or she also, expresses gratitude, love, and respect for the person who he's asked, whatever he's asked or she's asked of that person. And that'd be a skill set that would be invaluable. I've seen a lot of leadership problems from both sides. Just enlisted to officer, between officers, mostly, and most specifically junior enlisted to senior enlisted. And I feel like if there were more authoritative leadership styles, and I'll give the Air Force credit. I think of all the services I've seen, and now it's been Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force. And I've done plenty with the Army, believe me, but just never actually been a part of them. I would say probably the Air Force has it down best so far, but there's a long way to go. We have a long way to go. So that would be the skill set I would give them, I guess, authoritative leadership. True leadership is what I call that. Because if you're just forcing someone to do what you said because you have some kind of positional or rank control over them, then there really is no growth there. There's no development. There's no cohesion. There's just force and oppression, and it creates this terribly hostile environment. But if you're really there for your soldier or airman, and you really truly care about them as a leader, then you don't simply authoritatively control them. You don't simply authoritarianly control them with your power and no expression of affection. but you actually build them up with affection at the same time that you demand a lot from them.
If there's someone who is struggling or could really use someone to talk to but feels nervous or anxious about going to a chaplain, what would you say to them?
Don't be. I don't know. Trust, faith. Shakespeare comes to mind. I love this quote. He says, "How oft we lose the good that ere we might have won by fearing the attempt."
That's awesome.
And I love that because truly what holds us back in life, even if it's something as simple as going to talk about your problems, is the fear. And, I think it was President Kennedy who got famous for saying, isn't it? No, maybe not. Maybe it was, maybe that was originally Roosevelt who said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Right.
And I think that, I think that's true. Fear holds us back. I've found, everybody, when they think of religion, they think of good and bad, and, evil and righteousness. And they think of something that is right and wrong and sin. But I don't think Satan uses sin nearly as often. The temptation to sin or do something, terribly wrong or against what you believe or against what you know is right. I don't think he uses that as often, though he uses it plenty. I don't know that he uses that as his main tactic. I've seen as a chaplain more that it's fear. He instills fear in the hearts of mankind. Fear for things we don't know. Fear for things that we think might happen to us. Fear of what others might think about us. Fear of repercussions. And that fear, like Shakespeare said quite poignantly, it's what holds us back from the good that we might win. If we would just try. If we just go and do that thing that we know we should do. Don't be afraid. Come talk to us. We're not here to convince you to believe one thing or another. We're here to serve you and show you the respect that you deserve as a warrior for our country, be it air, land, sea. Like, we respect deeply what you do for our country, and you need not fear your chaplain. And I'm sure there are chaplains out there, just like any other profession, that are not perfect and have done things to betray people's trust, I suppose. But for the most part, the chaplains I've worked with, and it's been many, many, many dozens now over my career, have just been there to help, no matter what creed or faith or whether you don't have any belief at all. They're there to help you, and I wouldn't be afraid to talk to them.
Well, Chaplain Cooper, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great. God bless.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found a new mindset to help you excel. I really loved the quote from Shakespeare, "How oft we lose the good that ere we might have won by fearing the attempt." I also liked how Spencer Cooper talked about the value of pain. Chaplains are an incredible support and resource to our troops, and it's amazing that it's one place you have 100% confidentiality. If you're in the service, it's my recommendation that you find and talk with your chaplain, even if you don't need any counsel, just so you know where to find that resource should you need it. As always, please share what you learned on the Tap and Move Forward website or social media sites. And if you want more information on Spencer Cooper, please visit www.tamfpodcast.com/Cooper, COOPER.